Content warning and advisory. This video contains topics that may be sensitive for viewers. This includes, but is not limited to, discussions of racism, abuse, sexual assault, and human sexuality. Please approach this video in accordance with your own needs and preferences, and feel free to discontinue viewing at any time.
Hi everybody, so welcome back. This is part 2 of Adult Topics in LARPing. I am here with...
Hello everyone, I am Dr. Rachel Orstano. I am an acupuncturist and a mental health counselor. If you see me in the wild, you can call me Ray. And I'm here because in addition to my professional experience, I also have over 15, something like that, years of lived experience in the kink community, and at this point about 5 years of experience in LARP, and I couldn't help but notice that there's quite a lot of overlap between the two, so here we are talking about it.
Here we are talking about it. So the very first thing that I'm going to let you guys know is that this conversation is for adults only. If you are under the age of 18, I would please ask you to click away now and check back when you're older. Also, we're going to be going over some pretty difficult topics. Just straight up, we're gonna have a list that's probably gonna pop up like right here about all the things that are going to be in this topic today. A lot of that is going to revolve around sexual assault. We're gonna have discussions about rape, race play, racism. We're going to be talking about oppression in many forms, transphobia, just general queer phobia, homophobia. And we're going to be talking about these things with the intimate and adult context that they deserve to be spoken with.
And I think in addition, it's important to frame that part of the reason that we're being very direct and using terminology that folks might find abrasive, but is in fact the accurate terminology, is because we exist in a culture that was founded by white colonialist oppressors that come from very, very oppressive, extreme religious backgrounds that had very restrictive views on sex and sexuality. And also in that culture, it is considered rude to name the problem. It's considered rude to call someone out for something. It is considered rude to say the thing that is unsaid. And that is what allows issues to flourish. That is what allows people in marginalized groups to be harmed. And so by saying these things and by using these words and by actually discussing these topics in a public forum, hello YouTube, we are trying to combat that in our own way.
Yes, I couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you so much. So with that, buckle up, get something to drink, and maybe a snack, because we're gonna get into it.
Oh, well, you just went to this really great LARP that I'm really jealous and envious and all of those words that I didn't get to go. I want to go next year because this is totally on my alley. So why don't you tell us about this LARP that you went to that I need tickets to next year?
Okay, so the LARP that Ray is referring to was Giovanni, The Last Supper. It was an excellent experience. As far as I know, it is the first and only LARP on a blockbuster international scale to be owned and run by a trans man of color. And I think it made all the difference because the game allowed for topics of racism, exotification, a whole list of sexual topics, everything from like rape to like incest, like everything under the sun was a topic that could be touched on about in play or in a backstory or anything like that, frankly. And I think what made that experience not only so rewarding for me was that I could finally play some of a mixture of my oppression. I actually got to express and explore the nature of that oppression in the game in a really safe and thoughtful way. I also got the opportunity to address a lot of the topics around assault and rape that I, as a survivor, have also wanted to touch on. And so the first thing that I really want to say about going to Giovanni is that they had really great safety systems in place. So we had workshops every single day. So we arrived on like Wednesday, I think, and we had a workshop that the night we arrived. We also had a workshop Thursday morning, and then we went into play at night, and then we would have a next workshop the next morning, and we would go into play at night. So there was time to calibrate, adjust, ask questions, and also talk to your fellow player and be like, oh, I'm not vibing with this, or hey, can we do this instead, or hey, monster me more, or let's do this, which was super, super helpful. And one of the best things I think I've ever seen was that on the topic of race play and exotification, it was an opt-in system. So if you were a person of color, you had to opt in to wanting that. If you did opt in, other players, whether they be white or other POC, would have a code word or a sentence that they could engage with you with. So, for example, you know, and this also went for religious persecution because there were Jewish characters at the event as well, or Jewish coded characters, where you would say, "Let me tell you something about your people." And your response, if you wanted to engage in this race play, would be, you know, what do you know about my people? And then that would be the cue to be like, all right, go say some horrible shit. Or if you didn't want to engage, you would say, you know nothing about my people, which meant off game, not interested, drop it, and then they would move on.
So that's really important, and I think that's really interesting. So to clarify, it really sounds like the person who has a marginalized identity in that context, whether it's religious or racial or what have you, is the one who gets to control whether or not the group is engaging in that particular type of role play, and also how intense.
Yep, 100%, and it made all the difference, because we also had, as we know, Malleus has a ramp down phrase, which is "oh mother." What I liked about Giovanni is that they had both a ramp down and ramp up phase. So if you wanted more, you could say that you wanted more. So the ramp down phase, which was really funny and could sometimes give an air of like brevity to the situation, would be goodness gracious. So if you said goodness gracious, everybody know, okay, like chill, like bring it down a notch or so, you know, maybe step back from the person, whatever. And if you said in any tone, oh please, that would mean bring it on, go harder. So oh please and goodness gracious were your ramp up and ramp down phases, which again, I have seen plenty of ramp down phrases, but never one that told you I wanted more. The only way that's been done is that like at the night in question you could do 2 thumbs up. Yeah. And that's about it, but there's no like diegetic in-game way to say, no, like beat me up harder or do something worse. go harder. Monster me more. That's also another term we picked up there, was monster me. So monster me more. So I that was like all super groundbreaking when we were there. And the third thing that really impressed me about Giovanni was that when it came, so each game had trigger topics, and the trigger topics would change every game. So the trigger topics would be like, it was in the survey, and you would say, what are, you know, topics that are triggering for you? And then they would amass all of them, and then basically be like, okay, the average, or like, you know, the major trigger topics of X run, so I was run 5, were miscarriage, suicide, and rape. And so the thing was is that you didn't have to, so you could play on any of those 3 topics, but if we were going to talk about them in a more kind of shared space, but not overly loud, just kind of like us sitting here, I would approach you and I'd go, you know, trigger topic, rape, and you could say yay or nay. And if you said yay, we would just go into that. If you said nay, we would just not. And if you wanted to act it out, so specifically they were like, if you would like to live play any of these things, you can go into a room, a private room, and you would take a door tag. If the door tag was green, that meant, hey, this is a trigger topic happening in this room, but anyone that would like to engage in that trigger topic is welcome in. Just know that this is what's going on in here. And if it was red, it meant this is a trigger topic happening in this room, and this is only for the people that are in this room. That way, if you have like a certain energy, or let's say you had negotiated aftercare after whatever you're doing, you don't have somebody else's vibe kind of like coming into the space.
Yeah, that, I mean, there's 2 really interesting things there, or probably more than 2, but just on the surveys, that's very cool that they basically were able to essentially customize the warning system and the content warning system for the actual players that were attending each specific game, because there are some things like miscarriage, I think is a great example. Miscarriage might not be something that comes up for everyone, but when it does, it is a really severe and triggering issue and can bring up a lot of difficult memories. And so the fact that they were able to customize the game and that they had the forethought to make sure that was really that's really a player run thing to do, that gives each game an extra level of care that I haven't really seen. That's very cool. But on the topic of the different rooms, that's really interesting, because one thing I've been thinking about is the way in which we engage with kink in public spaces. If we're in a play party, for example, I don't mean public like outside, I mean public as in a space where there are other people that are not necessarily your play partners or significant others just wandering around and you're in this closed unit with them. And when we're in these spaces, how we think about the way that our kink play can affect other people around us, and the consent involved in whether or not they've consented to witness what we're engaging in. And depending on the type of space that you are in, and I do mean the actual physical space, which I'll get into in a second, it can make it easier or more difficult for more extreme forms of play to take place. Obviously, let's say you're going to an event and it's like an event that is specifically a needle play event. By going, you're opting into this needle play event. If you have needle phobia,
title, bro.
Don't go to the needle play event.
But
most events tend not to be focused around one specific kink and are, they're kind of anything goes within the rules of the legality of the city or state and the rules of the space itself. So, some spaces might require that nipples and genitals are covered, for example. Some spaces will not allow fire play because of fire codes, and if the ceilings are not high enough, just random stuff like that. We have to think about this.
Yeah, we have to think about this, that's true.
And so, but in terms of types of play that might be triggering for other people viewing, I've been in some spaces where it is essentially a big warehouse. So you can see from end to end, and unless they've taken the time to actually partition off spaces, you can't really avoid certain kinks unless you're really good at just ignoring things, and you have to kind of be aware of the fact that when you're entering into this space, you might see something that makes you uncomfortable. However, there are also spaces where there might be little private rooms, and if there are little private rooms, then sometimes they will restrict certain types of play to those rooms. So going back to the needle play example, needle play, blood play, anything like that, not only can that be triggering for people to see, it can also be a little messy. There's also some obvious hygiene extra precautions that you have to take with that sort of thing. And so in some of these spaces that are more specialized, there might be a medical play room where there's lots of sterile surfaces or clean surfaces that are easy to sterilize after. And this room is where the needle play is supposed to happen, and you're not supposed to bring it out into the general space. If someone wants to observe that, they can go around and peek, and usually the door is open and they can take a look, and it's encouraged for people to go and explore that way as long as they're not interrupting the scene. So that's kind of a little bit similar, right, to you have the doors closed. We usually have the doors open in our kink spaces unless there's something very specific I've never been to. It's kind of understood that when you're going to a public play space, everyone's kind of involved. You're not interrupting scenes, but you wouldn't close the door, if that makes sense.
That does make sense.
Yeah, unless it's like a different type of, unless it's more of I don't know, a place where people are going to pay to have doors closed.
Which I mean, power to you.
Yeah, right. But that is interesting also because you're using we use the stoplight system all the time, so you've got red and green there, and you can opt in, and you know that in that system, it's going to be one of these three things. It's going to be one of these trigger topics that are specific to this particular event. So if you don't want to try your luck and one of them freaks you out, or one of them brings up a really difficult things for you, one of them just, in kink terms, kind of squicks you a little bit, then you can just take a step back.
And that's okay.
And
there's nothing wrong with that. I think sometimes we get this thing where it's like, oh, well, it's not for me, so it shouldn't happen. And that's not cool. Like, first, I don't believe in yucking somebody's yum, whether that comes to kink or just LARP and what people want to play. Everyone has different things that they are seeking and different narratives that they want to tell, just like there are different scenes people would like to act out. And I think when we get into the whole like, oh, well, that makes me uncomfortable, we've had a really long a response for a really long time in the community is like, that makes me uncomfortable, therefore should not exist. Therefore it should not happen. Or if I can't play that, it can't happen, which is not true, and it's not fair, because we've created, by that mentality, we've created a community that doesn't allow for safe spaces where those things can be explored with full consent and acknowledgement and everything. And if you don't give, we said this in the first one, if you don't give people places to do it safely, they will try and do it unsafely.
This is very true. And I think that in addition, what we've been talking about, the kind of running theme of this is that context, right?
Yep.
And so these types of themes, there is a way to do them safely and a way to do them with everyone's consent and to empower the people that are most affected by them and make sure that it is contextualized properly. And if we shy away from it, we lose that opportunity.
Yep.
We lose the ability to say, okay, we're going to engage with this particular historical time frame, and this was the reality of that historical time frame.
And this is why.
And this is why. And the people that are playing these roles get to decide if they want to engage with this particular reality of that time frame, or do they want to kind of go about their merry way and just not. Just opt out.
What I appreciated about Giovanni is that it acknowledged the historical time period it was in, and I specifically asked when I played, I made the request, I was like, I want to be a second generation European slave. So my character, it's too early for the transatlantic slave trade. So my character was her mother was a slave that was sold to the Portuguese, and her master raped her, and my character was a product of that. And we played on the whole themes of, you know, exoticism, as I've said, but also just like feeling othered and never truly feeling like you belong anywhere ever. And the thing is that being able to acknowledge, because that's very real for me. That is very much something I have had to deal with in my real life, something that is very, something I go through basically still every day. And from both sides, whether it be from, you know, white people telling me I'm, you know, X, Y, and Z thing, or other people of color in a move of lateral violence being like, you're not enough, you're not good enough, you're not good at representation enough. So it was a topic that was really, really powerful for me, that I think Orion, the creator of Giovanni, along with their partner Sable, I think gave it in its narrative of the backstory, because my backstory, girl, it was 55 pages.
Oh my God.
It was a 55-page backstory. That, like, what I mean, they went through every detail.
They wrote you a book. They wrote you a novella.
They wrote me a straight-ass novella that I'm going to keep forever. I'm even thinking about printing it out. It was so good.
Oh, you should totally get it bound.
Oh, yes, I should do that. But, like, you know, all of those things are important. And as far as I know, every person of color that was there basically opted into the system. I think there was maybe one or two people, but everybody of, and most of them were either playing female characters or were AFAB that really, really were like, no, this is what I'm here for. Please play with me in this way. And where I was going with this is that in the States, we have there's these new kind of floaty terms called race-blind LARPs and queer Utopia LARPs, and I will define what each of those things mean. So race-blind LARPs mean that race has nothing to do with anything. It's not a point of conflict. It's not something that's brought up. There is no discrimination of your skin color or race at all, right? And not even in like the fictional way where it's like you're an orc and therefore discriminate. Like, no, I'm talking about like in the real context, oppression of real world racism. And like 99% of LARPs in the United States are race blind, except for maybe a couple of private ones that have the balls to do it because they're private. And then we also have the notion of a queer Utopia LARP. And a queer Utopia LARP means that, in the same vein as race, being queer has no impact on the narrative, no conflict. There is no narrative through lines that you can play on being queer. There's no homophobia, no transphobia, and whatever. And I want to just make it so clear, okay? It is 100%, 160 million% okay for those LARPs to exist. They need to exist. Not everybody wants to engage with these super hard topics, sometimes LARP is just an escape away from those kind of oppressive narrative beats. And that is fine. The problem lies is that we don't have spaces where those things can exist. And if every LARP is a queer utopia and a race-blind LARP, honestly, to me, it really inhibits the ability to tell deeper human stories, because unfortunately, it is a fact of life that those things shape who we are or who we become through those horrible acts or words that are said to us in our day-to-day lives. And I think if people wish to explore that, they should be allowed to, but also the people who don't want to explore that should also be allowed a free space away from that. I think it's all about balance, and if you want to bring in those topics, kind of like, I guess, in the kink space, where it's like, if it's clearly said that these are not the topics that should be played on the LARP, and yet you try to bring them in anyway, that's not cool, because you signed up for a space where that's not the case. But if you sign up for a LARP, like Giovanni, we're in big bold letters on the top of the website, it's like, here's our document that talks about race play and how we're going to be doing that, and like sex play and how we're going to be doing that, and you sign up for it, and then once you sign up for it, you're like, but I don't like that, so it shouldn't happen at the game. But it's like, but it was right there, you signed up for it.
I don't like that you have bruises painted on your knees, so I'm gonna leave the game now.
Yeah. It's like, but we signed up for this. This is what we're playing.
I also think that it's important to remember that we don't exist in a vacuum, and that means something both for these, as you say, queer utopia LARPs, and also things like Giovanni. So in the context of something like Giovanni, and then in kink spaces where if we are exploring kinks around race or sexuality or what have you, it is important to realize that even if we are entering into a little kink space or a separate or Giovanni room or something like that, that we are not isolated from the greater world. We are not isolated from our biases, and we still have to question them and think about why we might want to play with race, why we might want to do XYZ thing. What is it about the power dynamics of that appeal to us, and really interrogate that, because if we go in without thinking of that, we might end up perpetuating
100%.
the same issue. And if we don't interrogate that in a queer utopia or a race-blind space, what can end up happening is you think that, oh, because this space is a queer utopia or race blind, that means nothing can go wrong here. And so when someone does experience microaggression, when someone does experience some sort of issue, it can be very tempting for the showrunners, for the game runners, and all of the players to brush it under the rug because, oh, that doesn't happen here. And that is also a problem. So regardless...
I'm looking at you, New England. Right there, I'm looking at you right now.
So regardless, when we are thinking about these things, we really do have to remember that we are still products of our society, we are products of our culture, and we're interacting with each other in these spaces to try and confront that in a certain way. And obviously, if you're going to this game at Giovanni and you're saying that all of the people of color wanted to play with their culture and their background in this way and explore it and reclaim it, there is a call for this. This is something people are
And they were all American. I'm going to make that so clear, too. All of those people were Americans that wanted to play and play on that. And the thing was about this particular run that I was on, they called it the Night in Question run because most of the people that were there were from the Night in Question, and also majority American. I believe it was like 80 or 85% of our run was all Americans. So, I took it upon myself to go into the Discord and be like, hey, if you want to engage with my character, this is like a central theme to my character, like racism, exotification, all of that's like, it's all like rape, all of that is a direct line in my character. And I really, I said I would encourage our white American friends to not shy away from these topics, because white Americans tend to be like, yeah, I know that this is something I'm going to play on the LARP, but I'm just going to like look over here when this is happening because I don't really want to engage in it. And then I think the question that a lot of white LARPers and LARP runners have to ask is, who are you making comfortable by keeping these themes out of the LARP or not playing them? Is it the people of color that want to play them? Or is it you for not wanting to confront that or be uncomfortable? Because one thing I have really noticed throughout my whole life is that white people tend to love comfort and don't like putting themselves in uncomfortable situations or situations that, make them question, am I the baddie? Did I? Because listen, you can be a really cool, super woke, leftist commie and still have partaken in a system of oppression. Like, and that's okay to acknowledge that. It's okay, bro. Like, we live in an oppressive society. If you can't acknowledge that even in a pretend space, how are we gonna make this any better? And I think half the battle is coming to terms with that. Like, I think we all have to acknowledge the roles that we play within society to play on the roles that we would like to about society.
Right. Yeah. You know, the honor of speaking directly to something is topics like rape play or consensual non-consent, as it is sometimes called, and you're talking about
or CNC, I think would be
CNC sometimes, and you're talking about engaging in these racialized dynamics within the play. Also, something maybe a little bit more straightforward, which I'll explain why this is connected, but straight up masochism in the kink community. A lot of people wonder why someone might want to engage with these things if they experience them in the outside world. I think I'm going to start with the masochism example because I think it's actually the clearest. I know a lot of people in the kink community who have chronic pain. Chronic pain like fibromyalgia, cystic fibrosis, something where their bodies are always aching or have restriction of movement, restriction of their day-to-day life, that then go into the kink community and engage in receiving pain play and are heavy masochists. Why is that? Because two reasons. One, the pain of what they're experiencing in kink feels very different than the pain that they experience when they are living their lives as a person with chronic pain. And also, when they're in a kink space, they control the pain that they experience.
Yes.
And that is why someone who has experienced sexual assault might engage in consensual non-consent or rape play. They get to experience something that was very harmful for them on their own terms in a safe container. And I presume, correct me if I'm wrong, that maybe that was something that helped you and made you feel safe enough to play with your racialized background in Giovanni.
Exactly. She's exactly right. And like, I am a survivor. You know, I'm not afraid to talk about it. You know, in early 2018, I was violently assaulted in my own home, and then again by the same person at an event. And I have been in PTSD recovery therapy with a specialist for about 3 years. And because I didn't, you know, it's one of those things where you don't realize how bad it messed you up until like you're fully in the cope, and then it's like, oh no, I need therapy. And I want to make it so clear that at no point was LARP ever that therapy for me. I mean, there was no experiences where like that would even be an option, frankly. But like, I want to make it so clear that as a survivor, if you too are a survivor that wants to explore these themes or things that are tangential, because like, let's be real, okay? Sexual assault, when it comes to LARP and how it is used in the LARP community, like that, just that term, it's a whole blanket term. Because sexual assault could be an unwanted kiss on the lips, or an ass grab, or it could be full-blown rape. So there's like a million of things under that umbrella. You're not a bad person or a bad survivor for wanting to explore those themes. You're not. And even if you're not a survivor and you're interested in exploring those themes and the power dynamics around them and how they affect you or the you know, the perpetrator or the victim, and exploring those narrative beats, that is okay. Like, I don't know who in your life made you feel bad about it, but I'm here to tell you that it's okay. And that we should allow spaces where these things can be explored safely. Even at Giovanni, if you were depicting a rape scene, they actually gave us how to engage in a sex scene. In Giovanni, there were no genitals allowed to be uncovered, and there was no nipples, didn't matter your gender. So that meant that there would always essentially have to be a bra and panties, or, you know, an undershirt and boxers, whatever the heck you like to wear, okay? And so that meant even when depicting a sex scene, you couldn't get fully naked and do that. And the thing is that they even said, which I thought was so awesome, was that they were like, so essentially if you're having a sex scene, you're dry humping like they kind of do in the movies, but they were like, if you are a person with a penis and you get erect, you should tilt your pelvis so that if you're going to continue with the scene, that your erection is not bumping into the person in that way, because it's not something that you should be getting sexual gratification out of. It is for the narrative purpose. And I was like blown away when they said it out loud to everybody there, and everybody was like, oh my god, they're saying it out loud. And it's and when I asked the organizers, like, hey, like, why did you bring that up? They're like, because it's been too many times we've gone to a LARP where there has been depicted sex via dry humping, and the person with the penis, who in this situation they usually tend to be cis men, would just be able to continue the scene in the position that they were in with an erection, and then they're suddenly like, I was super cool with this until you got the boner, and now I'm not cool with this anymore, but the rules say that you can just keep going, but I kind of hate that. And like, I thought it was really cool, the Giovanni people, to be like, if you get an erection, you can still continue, just make sure that you are continuing with your erection this way.
Right. and I think that in the context of this game where you are engaging in potentially rape play, potentially XYZ serious topic that someone might actually have a trauma background with, that, you know, play could turn into something too real really quickly, and that is a great way to circumvent that. And I gotta say, in kink community, obviously, yes, of course there are people that are doing it with the intention of getting turned on and with the intention of getting each other off, often in public play spaces as well. That being said, kink play, I'm gonna blow your mind here, doesn't actually have to be sexual. And I don't just mean that you don't have to have sex in kink play, but also it doesn't have to be about a physical sexual turn on. It can be about a psychological dynamic. It can be about intimacy. It can be about, I've said my friends that I play with rope with, it's like braiding each other's hair at a sleepover instead sometimes.
It's very intimate.
So it really does depend on what the dynamic is. So even though, while yes, the someone having an erection or getting aroused or getting turned on is almost more expected in the context of kink, because that's why a lot of people are there.
Right.
If you're in a scene where you negotiated that you don't want any sexual or genital contact, that might actually be something that someone might say, hey, if you get an erection, that's fine, but I don't want any contact with it, so please turn away from me. Or if you get an erection, the scene ends, and I'm going to edge the heck out of you.
Both acceptable answers.
So there is a little bit actually of overlap there, although I think that in the context of your game, it's much more explicitly, we are not here to get each other off, we're here to play pretend.
This is a, you know, like, rape is a narrative that you're playing in for this pretend. It's not supposed to be like a, ooh, like, you know, that's not, and I will clarify, there are games where that is a thing. There are games that cross over very, very heavily with BDSM. Most of them are in Europe, they're not here. They're not here. And most of them are application anyway, and you probably won't get in. Like, trust me. Like, there are games where there is that overlap. There are games where real sex is used if the players want to do that, and it's okay. And it's something that's like, hey, if people are actually having sex, like, that is something to expect at this game. There are games where that happens. I'm going to tell you right now, in the United States of America, we are galaxies away from that. We are so far.
I don't know.
That.
Someone's probably having a house party somewhere we don't know about. They're not marketing it.
So yeah, some secret house party. But I'm going to tell you right now, on like any obtainable consumer scale, not happening at all. A part of it, and I'll be so straight here, a part of why I get why it's not included is also capitalism, because it is more profitable for a LARP to be as wide marketed as possible. True. And it makes it really hard to sell more tickets when there are more difficult themes in a LARP, because it may turn more and more people away. It may turn a lot of the general public away. And therefore, it is hard to make it more financially viable here in the United States, because unlike Europe, we don't get cool state grants for making LARPs. We just have to make them businesses. And therefore, if it is not successful, it will fail, which is why most of these LARPs that deal with sexual assault, rape, race stuff, like literally every red topic that we're talking about under the sun, tend to be private or invite-only LARPs that usually run at Airbnbs with a select group of people that they know that they can trust and whatever, because, and this is something I can't wait to get your opinion on, is the alibi. And so I don't know if there is something equal to this in the queer kink community, but alibi in LARP is basically the idea that people don't want to be seen, that if they are a villain or they do this bad act in LARP, that means that they would do that or are this person out of game. And so it's about having the alibi and trust of your fellow community members of knowing, hey, even though they, I don't know, did this horrible rape scene to this character, they would never participate that in real life. Because most white players want the alibi, like, it comes in different flavors. So most white players want the alibi of, I'm not actually racist. So if I play on race in a game, I want people to know off game I'm not actually racist. And so they're so afraid of being judged for being off, using the game to express their true secret racism, that they want the alibi of people knowing, hey, I'm not actually this. I wouldn't actually do this thing. And I believe if more players felt that they could trust their fellow community members that they have this alibi, we would be able to tell safer and darker stories.
So I'm not quite sure if I'm getting exactly what you mean, but I'm going to go forward with my interpretation in terms of the kink community, and we'll see if it lines up.
Okay, fair enough.
So, you know, it sounds like what you're describing is that there is this fear in LARP and in the LARP community that if someone plays a certain role, that they are perceived as being that role in real life.
Yes.
And they want some level of assurance within the game that people are going to understand that they are not that person.
Yes.
So in the kink world, I think it's both more simple and more complicated because people in the kink world are, even if we're role-playing, we're still ourselves with each other.
Yeah.
And
it's not a character
It's
per
not
se.
a character, but it is a scene. So it is contained within negotiation. So I think that because we have, you know, in most spaces, I'm not going to say that there aren't problematic spaces, but in most spaces in the kink community, because there is this common language around consent and this common language around pre-care and aftercare. So that's one aspect that I think can help people reconcile their sadism, masochism, what have you, with who they are as people, is to remember that this is care. Even if it doesn't look like care to someone who is not part of the community, it is still a form of care to engage in a scene that has been negotiated and agreed upon and is fulfilling for both parties. And because of that, there isn't generally a fear of, I'm worried other people are going to think that I am someone who goes home and is domestically violent because I used a flogger in this scene.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to laugh, bro.
You should laugh because it sounds absurd when I describe it like that,
does
right?
sound absurd. It's like absolutely
I'm not
a little absurd.
I will say that, you know, because of our puritanical, sex-oppressed American culture, white American culture, that affects everyone, even if you're not white, but especially those of us that are.
Yeah, that's so true.
There is a level of shame that we have to contend with in the kink community, and so those of us that occupy the top dominant sadist whatever role do maybe have to reconcile with, okay, why do I like hitting my friend consensually in this play space, and maybe think about, you know, what you're getting out of it, what the other person is getting out of it, and might have to overcome some shame about that. Ultimately, what it comes down to is that we are consenting adults, and everyone presumably has decided what they want, communicated what they want, and is enjoying themselves.
Yes.
And if someone isn't enjoying themselves, they use a safe word, and then we have a reset, and we talk to each other, and we reestablish contact, and we care for each other in whatever way needs to happen. So I don't believe it's the same, because it sounds like the real concern in the alibi situation is a community perception.
Yeah.
Whereas in the kink community, more what we would struggle with is our own inner shame, and being in community with other kinksters is what relieves us of that.
Okay. I think I think the fear is that people are using the character as a mask or, you know, an alter ego to commit these things that they would really like to. And to be fair, that was a problem for a really long time in the community, especially like the late 90s, the early 2000s, and even well into the early 2010s. It's been 11 years I've been LARPing, and let me tell you, what would go down 11 years ago and the kind of shit people would say would like literally never happen now. It would just never happen. It would just never happen. The game would be obliterated from orbit, either internally, socially. It would just not happen. And so I can understand that there is a whole generation of folks, mostly I would say that's contained to millennials and Gen X, that experience these really brutal environments where people were actual Nazis and use their character as an avenue to, you know, express their shitty views.
And I do want to interject and say that unfortunately there are people like that in the kink community. No community is, you know, pure and untouched by harm and people willing to do harm. And I will also say that we are all capable of doing harm, and we need to realize that there's no dichotomy here. There's no good and bad. We're all just people, and some people might do more or less harm in a community, but we're all capable of it. And so that's something to remember for restorative justice, little tangent. And also just to say that there are people who might use kink as an excuse to be abusive. But that is not consensual kink, that is abuse. Yeah. So just to say that does actually happen, but it's not an alibi thing.
Yeah. I think, you know, a lot of these issues have to be spoken with the nuance that they deserve. And I think that there is a tendency, especially online when these discussions pop up, to get very black and white about everything. Yeah. You know, I can't tell you how many times I have seen somebody ask a very innocent question where, hey, is X theme about assault okay in this LARP? And then somebody in the comments being like, how dare you even propose that would ever be okay? You're a sick monster. And it's like, bro, please. Like, it's okay for people to ask, you know, and it's okay, obviously okay for the game owner to be like, nope, that's not this space, not here, which is like, again, perfect. I'm again just reiterating it out loud. It is perfectly fine for that not to be the game, not to be the space to do that. But, like I said, because we don't have the flip side where there is a space to do that, you will continuously have people asking those questions or wanting to explore harder concepts and themes. And then the problem is, too, is that you get a lot of LARPs that have a gray area and are reluctant to define the gray area because they're kind of okay with you getting a little dark. But if they define the area, then, you know, it becomes a LARP that's about X, Y, and Z theme. When if they don't, plausible deniability, right? But the problem lies within, okay, so let's say you're lucky and every single player that is operating within that gray space is cool, chill, not crossing any lines, all consent is chill, and then what happens one day when it's suddenly not chill? When somebody either does something, it doesn't matter if it's by mistake or with malice intent, but something happens. All of a sudden, the LARP doesn't have anything hard defined on what's okay and what's not okay. So if you're operating in this like weird gray boundary, it's kind of like, okay, well, can this person actually be held accountable for whatever happened? It's not even defined here. You kind of vaguely allude that it might be okay, but it also might not be. So what does that actually mean? And then you have things coming in by case basis, and it just becomes this whole unnecessary, difficult process. The one thing that I can say I really enjoyed about LARPs that do define it, like the Night in Question, straight up, the Night in Question just says it right out loud. These themes will never be allowed in this space. That is rape, sexual assault, It has a whole list of things that can never be introduced into the play space. And then it has a separate list of, these are unavoidable themes, like gore, blood, things like that. And then these are semi-unavoidable themes, where it's like bullying, domestic abuse, drug abuse, because there are certain characters that have that. But it's defined. And that's the thing. I think we have to empower the community not only to be able to feel free enough to play on those themes, but LARP runners to feel brave enough to just list it. Like, it's okay. Just make it super, just like you have a part. If you're gonna go to the needle play party, it says needle play in the name, and then you go there, you're like, but there's needles here? If you have a clear defined LARP where it's like, just like Giovanni did, where these are the themes that you're gonna play on, this is what you're engaging with, that creates a more trustworthy environment where not only do you know what you're getting into, you can trust that the other people around you are also aware of what they're getting into, and therefore there is a safety that you feel in engaging in these harder topics.
So as you're talking about safety, one of the other things that I kind of wonder what this looks like in LARP, because I think I've seen something, you know, there's some parallels, but maybe not exactly the same thing, is that in kink communities, particularly in larger events and certain types of events, especially if they're large, like weekend play events at hotels and stuff like that, just like events where there is more of kind of an administrative side, or sometimes where it's just a community care thing, we have dungeon monitors.
Oh, like a Like a DM or a GM, like a...
Not like someone who runs the game. A dungeon monitor is someone who observes and makes sure that everyone is being taken care of.
Kind of like a referee in
More like
Fest.
almost like a referee.
Yeah.
So, and so I want to be clear is that the dungeon monitor, this is not about policing. This is about community care, because the dungeon monitors are always volunteers from the community. We tend to rotate in and out, so one day you might be monitoring and taking care of the community, or another day you might be playing and one of your friends that you were watching the previous day is looking out for you. And it's also meant to not only protect the community by making sure everyone in the play space is getting the care that they need, that people are paying attention to each other, and that the rules of the space are being observed, which I'll go into in a second, but also it's a way to help us protect each other from potentially, if we break a rule and we get in trouble with the space and we can't use it anymore. So there's a lot of reasons why we might have dungeon monitors. So one of them is, say, if, one of the rules is no fire play, and someone didn't read that, a dungeon monitor might go around and be like, hey, we can't do that in this space because of the fire marshal, and if we do fire play here, we'll get kicked out. For example, so simple stuff like that. There are dungeon monitors who are specialists in more extreme forms of kink. So, for example, if you are doing a rope play scene that involves a level of choking, you might have a dungeon monitor who is a specialist in rope or someone who knows breath play to come in and observe, and not to interrupt the scene, but to make sure that everyone is abiding by the specific techniques used for safety, and if something does go wrong, you have an extra set of hands.
Yeah.
So it's not meant to say don't do that. It's meant to say I want to make sure that you are supported doing this thing that might need a little bit of extra attention.
Yeah.
They can also be used for, let's say you're doing a scene that involves a little bit of consensual non-consent, and you're having fun screaming your head off, and there is someone very concerned for you, and they're wondering if your safe word was ignored and your top is still going. Well, a DM could have been informed about how you negotiated your scene from the beginning and could be there not to interrupt your scene, but to let any concerned observers know that in fact you're doing great, and that screaming is the scream of enjoyment.
They're having the time of their lives. That is actually great to touch on, because again, going back to Giovanni, and this shows how well it was done and can be done, is that, the LARP runners always made themselves available. They were characters in the game that would be roaming around, and therefore they could be contacted in game for kind of like similar reasons. It was kind of accepted that, like, if you heard screaming going on and it was behind like a closed door with a tag, like, oh, okay, that's some shit that's going down in there. But even if there was like a situation where, because it was an international game, so what might be cool in one LARP culture may be considered a huge offense in another one, or rude, or whatever. And it was, one of the things that was directly talked about the LARP runners was like, hey, if you're going into this space, please understand you're around other people who LARP in different ways, and what may be chill for you may not be chill for them. And if that happens, where you make an oopsie and you step on a toe, or you say something, or roleplay is too much, it was asked for both parties, both the person who stepped on the toe and the person whose toe was stepped on, to be able to approach the situation with graciousness, meaning that the person that made the oopsie should go up to the person and be like, hey, I did not realize that was an oopsie. I sincerely apologize, and be sincere about it, and be like, hey, I'm sorry about that. And then it was on the person who, in effect, to be fair in the, hey, I appreciate that apology. I may not want to interact with you anymore, or I may be cool with interacting with you, just please don't do that again. That was up to that person, but it was more about being able to have an open floor for conversation. And there were a couple of times where even after that happened, people were just like, I don't want to interact with that person. They informed the LARPers. They were like, cool, we'll keep you guys apart, or this is how we'll handle this situation in an off-game manner. And so there was always an open line of dialogue, both between players, if they made an oopsie or not. And I even witnessed an oopsie where, like, a player had gone around and spread rumors about a character that didn't want those rumors spread. And so they literally just came up, they're like, hey, I just want to let you know I retract everything that I said. We're just going to retcon that like that didn't happen. I'm like, no problem. Doesn't affect me. Like, if it makes this person more comfortable, no skin off my back. And that's how it should be, where we should be able to correct each other without it being like a world-ending event. Or if you made a mistake, and let's say, in a game where somebody was coming on to you in the game and you just broke character and you're like, hey, please don't. Or even if there was an in-game way to signal that you were not interested in that, like, my biggest thing is I fear, like, a lot, we don't allow for people to communicate and be wrong or make that mistake. And I'm not talking about like a really actually violent, harmful mistake, okay? I'm talking about if, you know, someone's coming on too strong, or if in the agreed upon scene they pushed you a little bit too hard, or they said something that, you know, was a little bit too harsh and that made you feel some type of way. I think there is both emotional maturity that is necessary to have on both sides. The victim to be like, whoa, what am I feeling right now? I'm gonna feel that and deal with that emotion in a mature way and handle that so I'm not just freaking out on the floor, whether that be I have to remove myself immediately or I need to go talk to this person immediately, whatever that is. And then also on the person to go, maybe I've read this social situation. I think this person may be bothered. Let me go check in, or I should tell staff that I may have made an oopsie.
So it sounds like what they've established is an exchange of an assumption of good faith in exchange for accountability. Right?
And we just need more of that in
Yeah.
our
We need more of that in society.
Yeah, we just need more of that in general in our society, but we also need more of that in the LARP community in general. You know, LARP, one of the best things that LARP does is teach each other empathy. And, you know, and I'm not saying that, you know, suddenly a white person's gonna understand all the oppression about being a person of color. That's not what I mean. But it can give them thoughts of like, oh, you know, playing through that and playing through that horror has made me understand what it means to be racist, or what it means for these people to be oppressed, and I want to be better about that, or I want to in my real life change that and work towards a better and more equitable society.
And I think that, you know, one of the things that can happen if you are if you're white or a member of any other group that has the privilege to turn away, that kind of becomes the default. When something is uncomfortable, you don't see it, and you're so used to not seeing it that it is normalized for you to just keep walking or what have you. And if you are given a safe space to explore these topics in a way that you know they're going to be, you know, led by the people experiencing these things firsthand, so you know it's going to be their choice and their safety is prioritized. So if you're a white person or cis male or what have you, your experience engaging with that is going to be safe for both of you. What it also does is it creates this safe situation where you are suddenly allowed to focus on it and see it for what it is, and not dissociate and not run away psychologically and not leave the space because you're suddenly uncomfortable, because you know that this is safe for you and that you're not going to be ostracized for engaging with this consensual dynamic. And then that is what gives you the understanding, being able to look it in the eye with everyone's consent is what gives you that space to actually really understand as much as you can from your limited perspective what that other person is experiencing.
100. That's beautiful. That was a really great way to put all of that.
And I have to remind everyone that kink is play. LARP is play. It's live action role play. This is meant to be fun. This is meant to be silly and goofy. We are not meant to take ourselves so seriously. So even though, you know, this entire talk has been on some very serious topics, you can engage with these in ways that are less sharp, are a little bit sillier, a little bit easier to palate if you are either on either end of the spectrum, if you're the one receiving certain phrases, or if you're the one who is like, I want to engage with this because this person hasn't consented to this type of play, but I don't want to accidentally trigger them and I don't know what their limits are yet, and we're kind of just doing in-game stuff. You can say silly things. You can say things that are like insulting, but in kind of a fun, goofy way.
Yes.
Aha, peasant, get thee my water.
Oh. I'm fine, I guess. Guys, LARP, I'm really sorry to break it to you, is pretend. It's not real. It's fake. It is like acting. It is not real. And I think sometimes it can feel very real, but it is not real. people just have to be okay to just have like quick check-ins for LARP. Like just have a quick check-in. It's not a big deal.
Yep.
Like it's okay, dude. You could just be like, hey, I was thinking about doing this really quick. And it's like, yeah, okay. Or almost, but let's change this. Or no, I'm not into that. That's all it has to be, guys.
Yeah.
You know, I've had people come up to me before in Malleus being like, hey, is my romance coming on too strong? And there has been both me being like, nah, keep going, go harder. And then there has been times where I've been like, yeah, actually, I think you could pull it back just like a little bit. And then they would always take that feedback graciously. They would always go, okay, no problem, thanks for letting me know. Because it's also on you when somebody's asking you to be honest about your feelings. You gotta be honest, guys. If somebody's asking you legitimately, hey, is this okay or should I pull back? And you say, no, it's totally fine, because you're afraid of making them feel some type of way or whatever. Putting yourself in an uncomfortable position does not make you or them more safe. It does not make the community more safe. That is not the right thing to do.
And this is a big crossover into the kink community, right? Because yes, of course, we talk a lot about how doms and tops need to respect their bottoms and subs perspectives and limits and all of this. And also, when we're trying to communicate and ask, you know, what are you interested in? How's this feel? We need honest feedback, because if you are in people-pleasing mode and you lie to us for our perceived comfort, and we inevitably find out later that that was horrible for you, even though we checked in, we're gonna feel like garbage.
Yep.
It's gonna do a lot of harm in a different way. And so that is one of the things. It's everyone is accountable for communicating.
Yes.
And also, this is a great way to learn how to do that. A lot of people struggle with communication skills because of trauma, because of cultural upbringing, because of different communication styles. There's a lot of reasons why someone might be hesitant to ask XYZ. And also, this is why Kink and LARP are amazing. It's because it creates a safe container for us to ask these questions and understand that not only is it okay to ask it, but it's actually part of the process. It is integral to the game. It is integral to the scene to ask these questions and to advocate for yourself and to say, I actually would prefer if we did this instead of this. Another thing that you can consider, if you are someone who has a little bit of trouble saying no to things, is what would you want to say yes to? You can instead orchestrate, that doesn't sound great to me, but how about this? I'd be really into this. I don't necessarily want you to kiss me, but I would love it if you threw me against the wall. Watch my head, but I would love it if you threw me against the wall. That would be so hot. That would make for such a great scene. And then not only does that feel good for you, because you got to advocate for yourself and say, yes, I want this, and have it happen, but that feels great for the other person involved in your scene, because they know that doing that thing for you is going to make you feel good, and that's also why they're there.
Yes, 100%. The next topic I wanted to talk about, which is like, if we don't define our culture as like Americans in a play space like LARP, other cultures will do it for us. And I am referencing a lot of the Western LARPs that happen in overseas, like Italy and Germany and Spain, that are maybe not the most tasteful experiences that we would want of American culture to be represented, or even the Polish LARP that deals with the like hillbilly hicks of the United States. It was a 4th of July LARP, and the thing is, you can bet that on every single
4th of July LARP, it's still just like really.
Oh
that's
yeah,
what you picked.
actually, people saw the photos
Oh
of
my
it and were
God.
like, "This just looks like my hometown." But, like, which is hilarious in some aspect, but the thing is that you can bet that on none of those LARPs was there as an American consultant, was there an American culture consultant. And I think that's like, here in the US, we're very sensitive about those things, which is like, whenever we borrow anything from another culture, or anything at all, or something may involve a marginalized community or group, we are always like, let's get them involved. Let's have them as a consultant or whatever.
Or sometimes we try and ignore it entirely, which is like a lot of the white Utopia
Yes.
queer Utopia LARPs that end up being white Utopia LARPs because
Yes.
no people of color want to go to them.
Exactly, yeah. There's a certain Regency male LARP I'm thinking about.
But yes, there is definitely a increase in thinking, okay, well, if we want to tell these stories, we want to make sure that we actually have people represented in places of authority, not just a
like random figurehead, but someone who's actually going to make decisions and make the incoming people feel comfortable engaging in these topics.
I think a really big mistake that a lot of LARP runners make is that they're like, oh yeah, we had a black consultant on this, or we have a black writer on the team. No, sweetie. You need to have people of color, or any of the, if you're gonna have a game about X-oppression, you need to have those people of the oppressed identity involved to tell a more thoughtful story. Like, to me, that's like the bare minimum. Or you need to have somebody that is like way beyond sanction, that has like studied it. Like, they're like really studied it in like a legitimate academic way to get involved. Because otherwise, if you're not even going to acknowledge history, then you're not playing, you might as well just not play history at all. And like, the thing is that with all of these Western LARPs, they come up with their idea of what they think happened, or what they think our culture is like. And since we are also too afraid to define it, because I will straight up say, I have said and gone on record in a public forum saying, hey, we don't even do those kind of LARPs here. What the hell makes you think you can do it correctly? Then the question becomes, the next step for me after I would say that, I started thinking, but why? Why aren't we doing that? Because if we can make the rules, if it's our culture, guys, if we make the rules, then suddenly when our culture gets thrown onto the world stage, it's like, oh, well, either there's a guideline, or there's people that we can go to, or we can use this game as an example of a healthy way of how it was done. But if we don't do that, as we see, other cultures will do it for us, and in ways that we may not like.
And that comes back to what we've been talking about this entire time, which is the importance of context, right? These are important things to talk about. This is our history. This is the history of this country and the people that have been affected by it in a multitude of ways. And we need to make sure that these stories are told with the correct context, the correct angle, so that people who experienced harm through this history can be uplifted to tell their stories around it, and so that we can engage with it in a healthy, restorative justice style way.
Exactly.
Basically, we need to create Westworld, but, you know, with better consent mechanics.
Yes, indeed, yeah. I think, you know, I hope to see it one day. I hope to see a Western LARP that is done with full cultural gravitas, with the sincerity and the detail and the gravity that it deserves.
And you know what the thing is? Also, I just had this thought. There are sets. There are Western sets that we could actually do this at. Like, we literally have film sets that are just like used for tours and camps and stuff, and we could just rent them and host a LARP at a legitimate Hollywood filmed set in the Southwest.
Great point that you bring that up. I think this will be the last point I touch on with this whole Western thing, is that there was a LARP on US soil that happened at one of those sets, but it was a Western LARP written by Europeans to be played on American soil. Some of you will know what I am referencing. It was many years ago now. It's like what, 5 or 6 years ago now. But it happened. It was not good. And they brought Americans on at the last minute being like, please fix everything. And the Americans were like, whoa, this is a disaster. Or like, I don't want to touch this with a 5 million foot pole. And of course, it's all before like BLM and everything. But like, you know, like I said, if we don't do it, we will then have Europeans trying to do it on our own soil back to us and sell it for like a blockbuster ticket price. And this is an encouragement to many designers that are out there, whether you be white or of color, that, you know, LARP is very much, somebody just has to do it first. Like, if one person does it, floodgates open. That has happened with every single thing, every major pokey topic in LARP. If one person just does it, it's fine. And then it will give everybody the ability, like, oh, okay, they did it. Oh, we'll do it now. Or we'll do it with our spin on it.
They did it, and maybe, hey, we want to do this right because we want to do this Western thing because we love Westerns. We think they're so cool. And look, there's this group that did it in America with the culture at this, like, real Western set. Maybe we could call them and ask for some ideas. Maybe we could ask for help. Maybe we could interconnect the international LARP community a little more effectively that way.
I think that would be a very healthy context to engage with that in. But with that, I want to move on to our next topic, which frankly, I think Ray's been itching to talk about.
We can't do this without talking about monster fuckery.
Oh yeah, monster fuckers. All right, I'm guilty.
Right?
Vampires count as monsters.
Yes,
Sorry,
they do.
you're a monster fucker if you like vampires. It's the
Yeah.
truth.
Doesn't
Werewolves,
matter-
all of it.
Doesn't matter if they've got, big snarly faces with lots of teeth, or if their skin sparkles like diamonds in the sunlight. They're still monsters.
They are still monsters. And I think to bring up vampires, I mean, Giovanni is all about vampires, but I think there is a topic that we have to acknowledge with vampires specifically, is that the vampire as it exists as a monster is wholly really about the loss of control, humanity, and consent. The way that the vampire preys on the human, it is non-consensual. The releasing, them taking the blood.
They glamour you.
Yes, they glamour you. They it's all based in those themes. And I think we do a disservice to both like the vampire and like the lore behind the vampire and the societal context around the vampire if we don't, acknowledge some of the roots of why we find vampires scary, spooky, and sexy.
And this is, even in kink, like someone might wear a themed mask for something. Someone might dress as a monster or a demon. Someone might do a fake sacrifice scene. Like there's all sorts of other role play that goes on into kink that follows this. Yes, I mean, there are tentacle dildos in the world. Like there's anything if you can dream it, you can fuck it. But I also want to point out that this is not new to our humanity and any particular culture. If you think about any aspect of, say, Greek mythology, for example, there's a lot of themes of assault and monster fuckery and all of this, and it's a lot of fascination around what it means to engage with something that is other than human in a way, or that is difficult to communicate with, and therefore we lose our power because we lose our communication, or has extra appendages, and that's just fun. And
hot.
Right? And hot. And there's
I see you, La Sombras.
I mean, that is why I wanted to be La Sombras, because I just wanted shadow tentacles. Let's
Hey,
be real about my motivation
and
for this.
utterly based.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that also I think can be very silly because it's kind of fun and playful, and also has a lot of depth in our psyche and our kind of universal human experience, this fascination. And again, we don't live in a vacuum. So a lot of the monster fuckery and a lot of the idea of monsters are queer coded, are coded as the other, are race coded in different ways. And that's also something we have to think about and engage with, especially if we're going on these very serious themes. There's a history of anti-Semitism in the development of the Western image of a vampire. There's a history of, think about Twilight and the anti-indigenous rhetoric about...
I'm so sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. I think that, I actually posted this a while back on my Facebook, and it was a video about the Confederate vampire. Where did the Confederate vampire...
I saw that video.
Yeah,
That was a good
where
video.
did the Confederate vampire came from? And one of the comments broke it down so succinctly that Anne Rice, with her reinvention of the Dracula or the vampire, she boiled down what made the vampire, and it was usually a man, upper class standing, had peasants beneath him that he could kill without remorse, or that wouldn't be missed or seen, right? Well dressed, very wealthy. So when you distill all of that down, what do you get? You get a rich white man that moonlights as a supernatural killer. Where in the United States would that be so easy to do? Confederate South, baby. So you would have,
or Batman.
or yeah. But like the reason that Anne Rice's books take place in the Confederate South and Louis is a slave owner, think about all those things. Rich, white, can kill slaves without having to be held accountable, all of those things. And so it's like we have to think about vampires in the cultural context of both what they meant in the past, as in Dracula, and also how we represent them now in media with that connotation. I think the new Interview with the Vampire oh my god, the best
It's
vampire
so good.
movie,
It's so good. Agree.
Ever.
Yeah. And
Ever.
also, if you're interested in learning more about this as well, especially the idea of the monster as the other, not only as a way to evoke fear of the other and coding of the other, but also in a way that we who are other, that we who are queer, who are people of color, who are Jewish, etc., see ourselves in that other. There is a lovely documentary series called Queer Horror, and I believe that it is on Shudder, which has a great 30-day free trial. This is not sponsored by Shudder, but if you're interested in more of this, I think Brian Fuller maybe directed this, but it's really good and goes into a lot of this history about the fascination that we as humans have with monsters and with horror, and also how that is coded as the other and our differing relationships to what that means based on where we come from in our cultural standing.
I love that.
And one of the things that I wanted to make sure that I brought up as a clinician, I feel like I have to touch on this, is that LARP and kink are therapeutic. They can be therapeutic, especially when used in mindful, deliberate ways. They are not therapy. Therapy is a very specific thing. And also, to add another level of nuance to that, there are aspects to therapy that are rooted in white colonialism and hyper-individualism. There are forms of therapy that are not, that are more collectivist-based, that understand that therapy is also not in a vacuum and so include other things.
Yep.
And in addition to that, there are forms of healing and through art and through dance and through shamanic work and all of these other forms of healing that exist in other cultures and are completely valid in their own right. And so therapy is not the only way to heal. So I'm bringing that disclaimer in to then also say that one of the things that I love about role play, both in the LARP sense and in the kink sense, is that it lets us engage with different parts of ourselves. And one of my modalities is internal family systems. You can Google that or put a link in so people can look up what that is. But basically, it involves having conversations with and working with your parts, different parts of yourself, different emotions, different inner child that might have been traumatized by XYZ thing, the part of yourself that comes up and reacts when it gets triggered in a certain way, or the part of yourself that manages everything by giving a disclaimer first, like I just did. And those parts are great to play with in a role play safe context, because maybe there is a part of you that thinks, oh, I really want to be taken care of in a certain way, and I want to be able to role play that out by being the child in a relationship, like the adult child in a relationship with a friend of mine who can play my mother.
Yeah.
Or I want to work with the part of myself that, cackles in the heat of battle and would love to be freely violent, but doesn't actually want to hurt people, but just kind of, wants to explore this concept, and I'm going to go be a barbarian and play with that part. Or I want to work with this shadowy, sensual part of myself that has always felt this shame about what I desire and what I've been told is not okay for me to experience in my body. And if I go into this contained scene or this contained game with everyone consenting, I can go explore this part, understanding that it is part of me, but it is not me. And I can see, oh, maybe this part actually needs a little bit more space in the real world outside of this game. Or, oh, this was great and this part got the validation it needed by playing with it in this game. And that's where it's going to live from now on. So there's a really wonderful thing that can happen when we are mindful, when we put things in context, and when we really work together to create these brave and safer spaces with each other.
Beautifully said. And to bring up parts work, so that is actually something that, at least my therapist calls it parts work. That is something I have directly experienced and is a common thing that I engage with in therapy almost every week. And it has really helped me identify what parts of myself, without knowing prior to therapy, I had put in my characters and I was trying to explore. When I played College Wizardry for the very first time, it was like my first international LARP. I think I played back in 2017 was my very first one. It was College Wizardry 12. I asked the staff if I could make my character mixed race, and literally my whole world fell apart when they just went, sure, but why? And I was like, why?
That's invalidating.
But in a way, it was just like, to me, I did not necessarily take it the way as invalid. For me, it was just like, why? why? Why do I? Because then all of a sudden it was like a moment where all of a sudden every character up until that point I realized I had made mixed race. Every single one, down to Alicia, the very first character I ever made, mixed race. And that game didn't allow for cross-race mix. So if I was going to be an elf-human mix, I had to be either an elf or a human. But they were like, you can do it anyway. That's why she has white hair but human ears. And like, it gave me, even though in a way, yes, it was invalidating, it gave me the moment of going, oh my God, is this something I have been trying to explore this whole time without even, am I trying to explore my multiracial identity through LARP and I didn't even know it?
Could it be?
Could it be? And honestly, ever since then, it completely changed my perspective on how I interact with that part of myself and my feelings towards my multiracial identity in LARP. And now that I'm aware of it, I can do it in a more intentional and thoughtful way that is better play for me and those around me that want to be involved.
And knowing this, yes, then again, we can engage with this in the proper context with each other in really safe spaces or safer spaces that allow for that exploration. And that might give someone else that aha moment of, oh, I'm exploring this thing that's so intrinsic to my identity that I never thought I could or maybe even realize was that important to me. And here in this space, I have inadvertently created a character that represents that exact point that I have been avoiding, and now it's actually not so scary and actually worth looking into a little bit more. So as long as we come to these things with this open-mindedness, but also this attention to detail, in a sense, and also playfulness, because again, it's all play. We're going to create some really beautiful experiences and some really beautiful communities, across the kink and LARP spectrum. And believe me, there's so much more overlap. Some of y'all are watching this being like, oh, well, of course, but some of y'all might be surprised. So yeah, there's a lot of overlap between the kink and LARP communities. And there's going to be more.
As somebody once said to response to my first video, wow, this isn't groundbreaking. I'm not saying that it is, but there's a lot of people who don't know about it on this scale or have thought about it with this kind of level of nuance and complexity. And giving people the tools to do that is just as important as recognizing that it's there in the first place.
Well, I, for one, am looking forward to the next Giovanni because I want to get my butt across the pond.
Highly recommend.
Play this vampire LARP
Yes.
I may or may not have my Etsy kit already picked out online for my potential character, and I hope that there are many more opportunities to have this type of exploration in the future within LARP.
I hope they're here. I want them to be here on this continent so I don't have to fly all the way to England for it, man. Come on. We can do it. We can do it, you know? I'm happy to help. Just call me. Or she's happy to help. Call her. We can do it. I fully believe that putting these things on a public, open forum, just to begin the conversation, is the beginning of that change. We have the power in our community spaces to make it safer, hold each other accountable, and talk about things in meaningful ways. And we should. I hope that our part 1 and now our part 2 has helped you guys understand that, hey, there's a lot more nuance to this than maybe you thought, and also, it's okay to get a little freaky.
And we hope to see you at a game someday.
Yeah, man, absolutely.
Come say hi.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I have been Raquel Skellington, and this has been
Dr. Rachel Orsano, aka Ray. Come say hi if you see me in person. I won't bite unless you ask me real nice and we've had a negotiation about it.
Based. I can't say I'll do the same. But thank you guys, and thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your night, and happy LARPing, and I guess happy kink play. Take it easy, guys. Bye.
Bye.